Hi, this is Donna with Sparrowstudios7 back with part 2 of the commentary with I Read and I Learn of Genesis 14. We're going to be talking specifically about the notes in my Bible on Melchizedek, who's listed as priest forever, and is only mentioned in Genesis in chapter 14 as far as I know. If I have to eat my words later on that, I most certainly will, because I'm learning too. But let's read about Melchizedek. Melchizedek is a mysterious person whose name means King of Righteousness. He was a Canaanite priest and king. There is no record of his family or of the beginning or end of his life. Abraham met Melchizedek after defeating 4 Mesopotamian kings. The Mesopotamians had raided Sodom and Gomorrah and captured Abraham's nephew Lot. We see this in chapter 14, 1 through 16. When Abraham returned from the battle, Melchizedek, king of Salem, which would later become Jerusalem, we see that noted in Psalm 76:2, was the grateful kings of the Dead Sea Confederacy. When Melchizedek gave Abraham bread and wine and his blessing, he was acting as a priest of God Most High. We see this in verse 18 of chapter 14. The true God created heaven and earth. We see this in Proverbs 7:17, 47:2, 57:2, and 78:56. Melchizedek correctly understood that Abraham worshipped the true God, and he praised God for giving victory to Abraham. We see this in verses 19 through 20 of chapter 14. Abraham received Melchizedek's gifts and gave him tithe, thus recognizing Melchizedek's higher spiritual rank as a priest. Hebrews 7 talks about this in verses 4 through 7. Melchizedek is an unusual figure in Genesis. Where other characters have genealogies, Melchizedek appears without any such record, and he disappears just as quickly. Much later in Israel's history, King David was perhaps reflecting on this when he said that the Messiah is a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. We see this in Psalm 110:4 and also in Hebrews chapter 7, verses 15 through 25. The book of Hebrews explains this statement, saying that Melchizedek is remembered as resembling the Son of God, Hebrews 7:3, but was not himself the Son of God. His priesthood lasts forever as an archetype. He figures or comes before the Messiah's priesthood. Like Melchizedek, but unlike the kings of Israel, Jesus is a king who also fulfills priestly functions. Melchizedek, a royal priest, was superior to Levi, the ancestor of Israel's priests. In the same way, the Messiah, Jesus Christ, is a better priest than the descendants of Aaron. Jesus provides permanent atonement for sins and direct access to his Father through his name. We see this mentioned in Hebrews 7:24 through 28. He guides his people by the Spirit rather than by law. Hebrews 8:7 through 13 covers that, and lives forever as a priest and king for those who trust in him. So Melchizedek shows up as a king and a priest, foreshadowing Jesus. And we see that because of the connection of King David mentioning him and him being brought up and compared to Jesus in Hebrews. So Jesus Christ is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He is God's Son who came to earth as a baby, and he gave up heaven for 33 years to be fully God and fully human, so that after 30 years he could start a ministry, preach for 3 years, die on the cross after taking on all the sins of the world so that our sins could be forgiven. He died, he spent 3 days in the ground, and then he was resurrected and is now living in heaven with God. seated at God's right hand, and God is his Father. So he is the ultimate king and the ultimate priest because he was the perfect sacrifice for our sin to be forgiven. And we see all the way back in Genesis 14 how God set up Melchizedek to be the perfect foreshadower of who Christ is meant to be. That he was not Jesus. He was just a man who was both priest and king, so that the Israelites could see Jesus and look back and be like, hey, he's a priest in the order of Melchizedek. Melchizedek was someone who served God Most High in the Canaanite land. He was a singularity, just as Jesus is. And I think it's really cool that Spy was able to pinpoint exactly where in biblical history, through King David and later on in the New Testament in Hebrews, where we can see prophecies about Jesus and foreshadowing about Jesus being fulfilled, because it adds more, in my opinion, more evidence and credence to the truth and veracity of the Bible. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed hearing a little bit more about Melchizedek, the mysterious priest and king in Genesis 14.